Welcome to Kremlin File. Here we are with Jack Bryan, everybody. Okay, give it up for Jack. Hey, Jack, how are you doing?
Doing very well. Doing very well. So happy to be on the show and be on the other side of the camera for once on the show.
Hey. Yeah, I know Jack is never in front of the camera. Okay, Jack is behind the scenes. And we are grateful. We are truly, truly grateful for that, Jack. And you didn't bring your cat today. So we hope that
she's around here somewhere. I'm sure she'll make an appearance whenever she decides it's fit.
She'll make an appearance.
That's it. Today, actually, we're going to be talking about, troll farms and about propaganda. And I think we need to go back maybe to, the one person that I want to talk about, who I want to start talking about, is Pargozian. Okay. And Jack, I don't know whether you can fill us in, on that, because he's a, let's say, infamous, figure in the Kremlin.
Pargozian is sort of known as Putin's chef. And that is because he is actually a caterer to the Kremlin and does a lot of that. And I think that one of the things that's really interesting about Russia and kleptocracy generally is how you kind of have to have these weird overlaps with jobs, where it's like, if you trust a guy to be doing this, you're going to also have to trust that guy to do a bunch of other stuff, because there's not that many people you're going to trust with that much criming. Right. And so Pargozian, in addition to being his caterer, also caters his internet trolling. But also he's been connected to Wagner Group, which is their sort of Blackwater private sort of group. And also, I believe he's providing most of the catering or food for the troops that are in Ukraine right now. And so he is sort of part of that.
Or not.
And the mercenaries, yeah. And so
or not.
Yeah, he's part of this sort of weird little niche sort of figure within the sort of Kremlin, that there are a few of these guys that sort of have these multiple fronts that they're doing on behalf of the Kremlin, and that sort of get fit into their sort of broader portfolio. And IRA was a really important part of that. And I think that in a similar way to thinking about how one node like Pargozian will be activated for many different things, it's also helpful to think of IRA as being just one node in a broader messaging campaign. Because one of the things that's so important about disinformation is that it's coming from multiple sources at multiple times. So the way I think about it is that, if I saw Olga at a party and I said, Olga, you look a lot like Mo. I watched the show and you guys look very similar. She could be like, well, I don't really look like Mo that much. Yeah.
Twins.
But then if three people at the party, if I've got three people around, I said, doesn't she look like her? Doesn't she look like her? And they said, yes. It probably still wouldn't penetrate, because it's all one sort of, still feels like one source. But if I came up to you at that party and said it to you, and then you went home and the next day you were walking down the street and somebody else said it to you, and then the next day a completely independent person also said it to you, at a certain point you would start believing it mostly, or at least a little bit. And that's the other thing, is that belief is not an on-off switch, right? Like we believe a range of things to a degree. And so disinformation is about populating that belief system with things that are either false or things that are contradictory to a clean narrative. They want to muddy up any narrative you can. And so by having separate outlets be pushing that in the same direction, and that's why it was so effective with Trump saying a message over here on CNN, and then you go online on Facebook to the comments section and hear the exact same thing. And you couldn't find two more disconnected sources both saying the same thing. And so that actually lends credibility to people who think of themselves as having an open mind. And disinformation is really supposed to attack that idea of, I'm an open-minded person. I listen to all sorts of different conversations and different sides, and I want to hear the full story. Disinformation manipulates that, targets that, and benefits off of it. Sorry, I went pretty long on that one.
Yeah, no. That's what we're hearing even now, right? Especially now. There's so many, the big thing is, well, it's free speech, this person, we have to hear this person's opinion, even if we're not in agreement, right, with it. And what we try to say, or at least what we're trying to get people to understand, is opinion is one thing.
And it's also your free speech to call that bullshit. That's part of free expression, is when you see bullshit, call it out. That's not diminishing someone's free speech. That's you expressing yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
And
let's get back a little. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to add a little context to Jack. Pargozian's troll farms and the disinformation operations were set up in 2013. So it was set up specifically right before Putin invaded Ukraine and started his war, annexed Crimea. And then, from there, they were focused on Ukraine for about a year and a half, and then they shifted over, and you'll see this common with all, Kremlin-linked media outlets, even abroad in the West. You'll see how they shift at the same time, and they run very similar things. So the primary focus was on Ukraine, then it shifted over to disinformation about Syria. U.S. working with ISIS, U.S. conducting, chemical attacks on Syrians, and a bunch of lies. And then from there, it got repurposed and went to our 2016 elections, then the Capitol attacks, and just continued on and on, whatever the situation is. So just to give a little pretext of when this troll farms.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important. And I think that in addition, that's when you also see, and you have these sort of former kind of whistleblower-y characters who seem to be pushing a lot of Russian disinformation eventually kind of start popping up as characters around 2013, and around Ukraine, and then Syria, and then MH17. That seems to be the first, the 1, 2, 3 punch. And I think that's one thing that I think is positive, is that when looking back at this from 2016, we were so unprepared. We were as Americans, like we would see this activity, but it couldn't be. Nobody works for a state. States don't hire journalists to push narratives that are.
Sure, they don't.
Only private companies do that. So I think that we're all probably. I think we're all probably a little bit more cynical now in a good way, and in a way that when you look back at that wave that started, 2013, it's very obvious. Yeah. It's really like it's spookily clear.
Yeah, well, and much more aware.
And also, just to add to that, we also saw right around the time with this online activity, all these shady outlets being like popping up across in US, in Europe, and you see kind of like these, they just start populating, and then suddenly they go from 0 views to 1 million views, and that was part of the troll factory, who had 2 responsibilities. One, to put out disinformation of all sorts from, like Jack said, like a wide array, just to confuse what the actual truth is. And 2, to push these outlets, their articles, to be seen by many people across social media and, and YouTube and other outlets like that.
Yeah. In fact, you mentioned YouTube. Just before we popped on, I was reading an article by Soldatov, who we're going to be talking to, coming up. And it was a whole explanation of how RT, had all these little sub channels, basically, that nobody really understood, that basically it was RT, but all then disseminated, and that's how they amplified all of the disinformation that was coming and that kind of thing. I wanted to ask a question, maybe Olga or Jack, either one or the other, because there are probably some people that maybe don't know physically what a troll farm actually is. Okay, I know it's a simple question, but for people who are are not looking at these things, what is it exactly? Olga, Jack, I don't know who wants to take this one.
I mean, I would say that what it actually is imagine you work for the most boring telemarketing company in the world, and you have to show up, but you have the longest hours, and you just have to sit in front of a computer and do X task, and you're not very educated and you're not very engaged, but they're paying a small amount of money and it takes no skill to do it. And you have probably a script. That's basically what it is, except for what you're doing all day is you're typing in narratives that are either there to create a false idea of what is going on, spread lies, or at least as likely to muddy up the truth, to try to do a sort of both sidesism to redirect anger. You know, if you're angry at the Russians, yes, oh yes, that's bad, but also this. Or, well, if you think that's bad, what about this? You know, and so it's all about like emotional jujitsu, just countering an actual like I'm angry in a very specific direction, and let me blunt that direction. Let me sidestep it. Let me move it around a little bit. Let me just redirect it in some way.
Okay.
But it's an office environment. I mean, you look at the videos of it. There's just people sitting, and younger people sitting in front of a thing. Usually they have a script. I mean, Olga's done more work on that, and I go into better specifics than I can, though.
Yeah. So it's just like walking into the office. You're in front of a computer, right? And they're telling you exactly you are Jane, okay, from Fishers, in Indiana, and you're going to be talking about you're going to be talking about your life, or something's come up in the area, and
critical race theory.
Sorry,
yeah,
exactly.
Critical race theory,
exactly. And you're going to be sitting there saying, "Well, I don't like this kind of thing," or start asking questions and putting it into doubt, kind of thing. Olga, how much do these people get paid?
I like a few $100s a month.
Wow.
For very long hours, like extremely long hours. I mean, they're there about 12, 14 hours.
Wow.
And I mean, again, there are several categories of them. Some of them are meant to look like they're assimilating someone in US or Europe. And, we saw a lot of it during the 2016 election. They all just popped up. And you saw, suddenly like Second Amendment and religion and everything in like their profile,
Yeah.
and you just saw a whole mass amount of them. So, if someone in Indiana, has a complaint about something, or mentions it, like their purpose is to reinforce it and to make it stronger. So they'll pop in and they'll be like, oh my God, I feel the same exact way. And, and then they'll kind of reinforce it. And when it's done in such a mass quantity, you kind of end up falling in this kind of echo chamber of people who think exactly like you. And then you get blocked off from the actual truth. You get blocked off, even on social media. You saw on Twitter, for instance, after 2016, how Twitter got extremely separated. And it was like you were either, on the left and whatever you're tweeting goes straight to the left, or you were on the right and whatever you're tweeting goes to the right. And like there was almost no crossover in between. Yeah. And it was meant to do that because it was meant to, just as like there was polarization online, you saw the same exact thing happening in real life.
Yeah.
And then some of them set up, went on to Facebook, set up Facebook groups, private groups, where now they're collecting people. And then they kind of, work on your emotions, because everything disinformation is meant to target emotions. The whole point is that the disinformation has to be so effective and so quick that you don't have a second to stop and actually process it, that you react versus like, oh, let me verify if this is real. And you mentioned RT. RT had a subsidiary underneath them, who, for instance, during our protest, posted a video of a protester setting a police officer on fire in Portland. And then it just circulated around and it just became whatever, which again, it's working on emotion. It's very dangerous because you might have NYPD in New York who just sees one of their fellow officers got, set on fire by protesters. That event actually happened in Guadalajara, Mexico, like a year prior. But people react too quick, and, and it kind of, they make sure to reinforce what you're already thinking. So they're targeting people who already were being fed that, like, for instance, the protesters in Portland were violent and that they are, attacking buildings and people and law enforcement and whatnot. So they want to reinforce it. So they show you this video. You don't have enough time to sit and actually say, you know what, let me check this video. Is this here? I mean, it ended up not even being in US. And then you had a whole slew of people who now think, Portland protesters burned a police officer alive, which didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I think that really hits on a really important point that I don't think we sort of talk about enough, which is the targeting of a specific kind of information to a specific group. So like one example that I can sort of think about with this is, I worked on a documentary for Vice about QAnon. And one of the things that I personally came to believe about QAnon is that the posts on the board, like what people think of the QAnon message board, or the board of their posts, I don't think the posts themselves are actually that important. I don't think that you can write anything you want on 4chan. No one's going to care. What mattered was that they had an ecosystem of YouTubers that were primed to push that messaging out. And, just to kind of a little proof of that is that one of the most famous narratives in QAnon, like if you know about any of the narratives in QAnon, you've probably heard of adrenochrome. Adrenochrome never appeared on the boards. There's never a single mention of adrenochrome in a single QAnon post. That was the community around it that had been built up, and they were also targeted. Like, so they had like the praying medic. If you were evangelical, to push QAnon at you. If you were like a new ager, young guy, they had Jordan Sather. And so it was having this ecosystem of people to push a message couched in a different argument to different groups. And that fulfilled, one is you get to micro-target, but also you get this, again, the sense of, I'm hearing this from multiple sides, from completely independent sources. This guy and this guy believe two very different things about all this other stuff, but this is a thing where they're aligned. Therefore, it adds credibility to this. And so that micro-targeting that Olga was talking about in terms of like, you can target the police with this message really has multiple upsides in terms of conducting a disinformation campaign. Maybe you shouldn't think of it in those terms, but
yeah.
And then another important thing to mention, that once you get pulled into this ecosystem, now they have control over your thinking. And, and from there, they kind of almost like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they focus on you and they kind of up the ante. So it's like 1 minute you're complaining about, oh my goodness, why do we have to wear a mask? Suddenly you have several hundred people who are saying, yeah, these are our rights. Why do we have to wear a mask? And then it goes into like from anger there. And then it's like, you know what? We need to do something. Why doesn't someone go to the school board and start burning the mask?
That's right.
And this is how you see them in baby steps kind of up the ante, where you're at a point where you just initially said, why I don't want to wear a mask. It's so annoying. To the point that you are now punching people at the school board, screaming at them, saying they're stealing your constitution and they're communist and whatever other nonsense, that they do. So they kind of cultivate you very slowly into a way where you go from actual discontent to actual potential, being primed for committing violence.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think a really good example of that, just that I've seen in my own life, is like with the mask thing. Like it's a very small thing to be like, oh, I don't like wearing masks in public. Therefore, when I hear of people saying nasty things about the truckers, I somehow see that as an extension of being critical of myself. I see that those truckers as being an extension of me not wanting to wear masks. And once you get locked into that thinking, you can go very far, very fast because in-group, out-group thinking is so core to human tribalism, human society. You know what I mean? Like, nobody in America thinks that a lot of people in America thinks the Constitution is God-given, and those are your God-given rights. But nobody thinks that they're God-given to people that we're at war with. So, in-group, out-group thinking is incredibly important just in terms of how we see ourselves. And I think that also brings an important point of we're all subject to disinformation. It's all pushed at us. Whatever we think of as being our in-group, somebody is going to try to highlight that, try to take advantage of that. And that's, by the way, it's okay. Like, we all believe something that is not true at some point because we've read something that was intentionally written to fool us. You cannot get away from that. You can do things to protect yourself and to not fall into and not spread disinformation. And one really should, but there's no reason to beat yourself up if for 5 minutes you believe something that wasn't true. that is just a thing of being on the internet
Yeah.
these days.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Olga, I was reading too your last article, or one of the last articles that you had written, and they revived, no? And in March, they revived one of the troll farms, okay, or maybe opened up a whole new one. And it was used, right? In your article, you were saying that it was used specifically, okay, to help out in a certain campaign. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so actually it was in my article, it was an amazing investigation that I put into my Substack, translated from Russian into English. And this Russian outlet in St. Petersburg, where Prigozhin's troll farms were, happened to see a new post that popped up. I believe it was March, like 14th, or in the late teens. So this new Telegram channel popped up, Cyberfront Z,
Yeah.
and we all know that
Yeah.
Putin has made Z the symbol of, his brutal assault against Ukraine by painting Z across. At first, people were scratching their heads trying to figure out what the Z's were when
Yeah.
it was painted on the military vehicles being on the border of Ukraine. And now suddenly you see the letter Z, like in human formations, are popping up all over Russia. And it's become the symbol of this war. I mean, to me, it's a Nazi symbol, but
Yeah.
so, so this new Telegram channel popped up. Their first post, according to this really good outlet, who actually then sent their correspondents to visit this place, their first post was recruiting soldiers for their disinformation operation, Trolls. So they put out a recruitment call. They suddenly, they started interviewing people, and then the Russian media outlets sent correspondents to this place in St. Petersburg. It's very like a room.
Yeah.
People went through the process of getting hired, and then were just given instructions. They were put into rooms in an old factory, and basically their job for the whole day from morning to night is just to sit and to attack all the war crime images coming out of Ukraine. Make sure that those images are discredited, make sure that everything, all the information and evidence we're seeing of bombings and now unfortunately mass graves and all the attacks by Putin's military, their job is to completely, discredit these things. They mainly are doing it on Telegram, but they also had, at that meeting when they were recruiting the TikTok person. So they're doing it on TikTok, on Telegram. I'm sure it's also on Facebook. I'm sure it's on Twitter. And then the second thing is to spread, how wonderful this operation is of Putin's and how he's liberating people inside of Ukraine and fighting Nazis and has no shortage.
And actually, to that point, I mean, I'd heard a few years ago about mobile troll farms within Russia whenever there were local elections. So they'd run out some local, building that no one was using and just fill it with. And most of that was actually the reason they had to be local is because most of it was printouts, because so many people don't have the computer that they would just hand out pamphlets that were disinformation pamphlets for local elections.
Yeah.
And everything Olga said, I think is so true and so important.
And basically whatever the Kremlin wants, this is what they're responsible for. They're given the script, talking points, and that's it. And it's honestly, if you were to ask me, I would think it's Prigozhin again. Definitely, I do think it's tied because he deals with the GRU and the defense ministry. So I'm sure this is being directed by the defense ministry. And that's it. So that's a new troll farm that appeared now, which is identical blueprint of IRA, what we found out from the Mueller's report and from, people who actually escaped the troll farm and came out to talk about it. So That's what we're seeing now, and it's specifically to target everything surrounding Ukraine and also put out disinformation. Yeah. So all this nonsense of biolabs we're seeing, and that they revived again. The latest I saw, I cannot believe this. I mean, this is literally when I say the Kremlin has a playbook that they reuse, I'm not kidding with their talking points. The biolabs have been, one of their talking points going back many, many years. I mean, they rehash it every time there's something, relevant. But now apparently Hunter Biden is funding these.
Oh, he's back. Okay. Well, no, I guess the laptop.
It's like, how can somebody both be useless and the greatest world criminal?
I know, he's like, yeah, exactly.
Turns out it's Hunter pulling all the strings all along.
Yes, apparently.
There you go.
And and they had this mysterious laptop, BS laptop, for 2 years. But suddenly now, when Russia decides to revive this biolabs, and it's coming through official channels, because this is the defense ministry who is making this bullshit of these bullshit documents they obtained that don't exist. The nonsense coming out of the defense ministry, it's like literally a Saturday Night Live skit. If it didn't affect so many,
when Hunter Biden parties, he parties so hard he takes over the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Apparently,
he's just
and suddenly they didn't investigate that laptop enough 2 years ago. Apparently now these are new emails they suddenly found.
The laptop.
As if if they wouldn't have found those emails of Hunter now, running biolabs in Ukraine before election in 2020. I mean, I think we would have heard by it then, not when the Kremlin decides to revive their, biolab talking points.
The one thing, it's really a point that a lot of people miss is that a lot of this is all tied in with the military. This is not just sort of, like a private person. This is part of a military campaign, and that's one point that people, even here, when I talk about this, they don't get it. They don't get this is weapons grade psyops, and it's part of the military. And, that's the way it is. And, it has to be treated as such.
Yeah, So when we saw, these Facebook ads and all this disinformation during 2016, the talking points of the Republicans is like, well, how are a few Facebook ads going to change, our election results? Okay. These ads were, first of all, Pargozian deals with defense ministry. He deals with GRU, which is the military intelligence branch of, Russia's intelligence services. These ads that were targeting these post ads, comments in newspapers. I mean, they literally find very creative ways to, make sure the memes that were coming, these are all part of Russia's intelligence services. So he was running this IRA farm, and now we're seeing this new one. This is being directed by Russian intelligence services, just like he has the Wagner Group mercenaries who have committed atrocities in Central Africa. I mean, walking in, raping women, killing people in villages. In Syria, we saw atrocities. They assisted in chemical weapon attacks on Syrians. In Crimea, we saw them involved in, opening up the concentration camp in Crimea and all the operations there, which American media for some reason labeled as Russian separatists. That does not exist.
I mean, those Russian separatists in Ukraine were only Russian separatists in that they had to separate from Russia to get to Ukraine.
Yes.
There you go. Yes. Perfect. That's exactly it.
Exactly.
And that's, again, another thing of how dangerous Russian disinformation is, because it spreads even to regular normal media, because they don't understand the difference. So, for instance, for a few years after Russia annexed Crimea and, then went into eastern Ukraine. For a few years, the media didn't understand what was happening. They called it a civil war. I'm like, what civil war? There's no civil war here. Then it went on to Russian separatists. No, these are Russian operatives who are there to control these areas and run operations. So Prigozhin is not only, in charge of cooking, he's in charge of sending mercenaries who I have watched videos I had to translate of them beheading someone in Syria and playing soccer with the guy's head. I mean, this is what Prigozhin's mercenaries are. And this is part of the Russian military, but it provides, like with everything else, how Russia uses the mafia to sell weapons or, to move money. And then if they get caught, well, we don't know. These are just criminals. The mercenaries, if they get caught, we don't know. This has nothing to do with us. So, it's a private company. The cyber criminals who, attack our colonial pipeline and solar winds, we don't know, these are just criminals hanging out, attacking big infrastructure in U.S. We don't know how that happened. So this provides them the plausible deniability that they need. And people fall for this narratives, innocently. And this is the whole point of Russia, to kind of also at the same time, not only run nonsense narratives that you just look at it, anyone with like 5 brain cells, they're like, what is this? But also kind of these narratives where it kind of waters down. So it's like, now I'm seeing one, populating, well, it's not really war crimes.
Oh my God.
I mean,
oh my God.
Like, it's a war. So of course the buildings are going to get bombed.
Can I read out the Red Cross and also like the UN and what it says about what a war crime is, which I have, by the way. I put it up on our site. So if you like to listen to that little video again, and I go right through the whole thing, Yeah.
Well, and this is such an important point, and such a really important point for Americans to remember. Remember January 7th, when everybody agreed it was horrifying, and everybody agreed it was the most devastating attack on American democracy? Okay, that changed. And that changed because you have information campaigns. Like, people's first judgment to things are the least influenced things that they will have. It's their primary, oh my God, I'm seeing this on TV. Once you give an operation 6 months to chip away at that emotion, to redirect it, to contextualize it, you no longer have a unified people being like, that was horrifying. It's a year later, and half the country's like, what was that? Who even knows what that was?
They were on vacation. They were there for a picnic,
I know,
exactly.
Right?
That's what they were there for.
Yeah. And so right now we see the whole country really on board with this, defending Ukraine, standing up to Russia. Give it 6 months with influence operations, then see where we are.
And
they've already started.
Already.
I mean, I'm monitoring here, and
I
mean, I can't get to France, but I can do some stuff that's in Germany, Italy. They've already started. But it's weird because they don't do it like
Absolutely.
it's not a head-on attack. They'll take a little, like, for example, I'll just give you a little bit of an example because I think it also mirrors something that's happening in the States. So, well, why are we dedicating 2% to our military budget? Right? Why are we giving so much money to the military? So they're going into the pacifist, right? All the people who say, oh no, that money should be used for education. Okay. That's how they divide, right? The electorate. And especially in places like France and other countries that are coming up, Hungary, for example, where there are elections, right? So this is what they're capitalizing on. And that's what I'm finding, right? And looking at all the different posts.
Luckily, we don't really have that much here. I haven't seen it, thank goodness. But the far left here, they've been targeting. And it's interesting because after Ukraine, after Putin ordered his assault on Ukraine, almost immediately you saw the far left activated in U.S. And it was like the far right was very quiet and kind of got confused. Some of them were on board, some weren't on board. A lot of them, you saw the same mirroring the even divide within the Republican Party. You saw the majority of the Republican Party, like they couldn't trip over each other fast enough to get stronger sanctions in place. And then you had the clowns, you know, who were like, oh, I don't understand. What are we doing? Same. But on the far left, this is where you see all the disinformation coming out from since February, since the end of January, I would say, even before.
Yeah, here
attack.
actually, it's not just the far left, it's also the religious base. The Pope, they're starting to bring him into it and saying, oh no, you know, we need peace at all costs, peace at all costs. This is what I hear, okay, every day. And it's very frustrating.
Well, they should talk to the Russian Orthodox Church that is absolutely on board with the genocide. And they were like, yes, we need to cleanse Ukraine of Ukrainians.
But as we were saying before, right,
Russian...
Jack, what you were saying before, and Olga, it's sort of like they take these, it's just like a slogan, okay, that they use, and it's a very simple thought. There's no nuanced, okay, let's say discussion of what is needed and what is necessary. It's just, you know, here's your slogan. You like to hear this, and just run with it. You know what I mean? So like peace at all costs, like what the hell does that mean? So, you know, we can just sit by as everybody is being, you know, bombed. Is this what we're doing? Right?
Thank goodness. I saw actually yesterday across all of Europe, churches had like kind of a unity with Ukraine, and they all came out of church in Portugal, Spain. I saw the scenes all across Europe. CNN actually was following the story, and they were on, like, thank goodness, supporting Ukraine and calling for end of war, but to Putin directly. Like they were like, time for you to end the war and get out.
We would love to see him out, right?
It's
I'm not going to get more graphic than that, because I think we've all kind of been fantasizing about. So let's see.
Well, Lindsey Graham said what we were fantasizing. He came out and he was like, "Okay." I'm like, "All right." And that if I said that, I'd be suspended.
Okay. Is there any last thoughts, Jack? Did you want to say something?
I mean, I guess I think my closing sort of thought is that so much of what we do online, especially in social media, assumes good faith. We assume that anything we're reading, at the very least, the person who's writing it has come to that position earnestly. And I think that it's a tough thing, because I don't want to tell people, like, don't have an open mind. Be really closed-minded when you're online, and don't be open to other points of view. But it is difficult. But I do think that we need to be a little bit more cynical about the stuff that we agree with, because that's the thing. That's where you're going to get got. It's very easy to identify disinformation on stuff that you don't agree with.
Yeah,
it's the stuff that you agree with. That's the difficult part, and that's where we all have to be sensitive.
Very good point. Yeah.
Do you see hope for us cleaning this up in the future?
Yeah, I do. You know, I am an optimist, but I think that I think that there is first of all, I think that as a population, we are much better about it than we were 5 years ago.
Okay,
it's a very low bar. It's not super, high standard, but whatever. And I also think that I think that there is a means to. I mean, listen, you're never going to get rid of it completely. No. It's always going to be an element in everything, and that's always going to be the case. And sure, 100%. But I think that right now, I mean, if a year ago you told me that Putin would be this isolated on the world stage, I wouldn't believe you.
Me either.
And it's horrifying what's happening in Ukraine. There's no but to that. And within that, Putin is now a figure that I think can be, if they continue to play it well, if they continue to work this well, can be continually isolated, can have that sort of power taken away. And, the fact that it is a conflict sort of allows, I would imagine, allows for a lot more dealing with this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? More actively dealing with this stuff from the government perspective. I hope that's what's happening. Because there's a chance for it doesn't mean it'll happen. Doesn't mean that they'll take the chance and take the opportunity. But there's clearly an opportunity there to isolate, certainly Putin, to really be like, hey, guys, we have a real reason to be cleaning up our online spaces. I wish people cared more about American democracy from an institutional level than they do, but they don't. But they do care about security. And as this becomes a security issue, I hope that this gets dealt with in a real way.
Now, Jack, you've been following the far right, sadly for you. That is a very scary place. But you've been following the far right for quite a while, and like we saw, prior to this, like the likes of I don't even know how to say her name, Bobart. Is that it? Lauren Bobart?
Oh, Lauren Bobart?
Yeah, and Marjorie's Halo Green. And they were kind of like the mainstream of the party, which was absolutely horrific. And now you see they've taken these very pro-Kremlin positions to the point of repeating everything the Kremlin says, like word for word. Do you see them being marginalized from the party? Like, do you see the Republican Party beginning a shift as, or do you still see them as central figures as they were, say, 5 months ago?
I do, because right now I think it's fair to say that the snapshot is that they're not central figures. But again, I think that that's a snapshot after a shocking event where everybody is on, okay, well, we all know how we think about this, but you're starting to see the chipping away. You're starting to see the bringing her back into the space where she is being defended. And so I worry that, I think what's going to have to happen is that they're going to have to lose big in a couple of election cycles. Like, I don't know that there's another, or a lot of people are going to have to go to jail. I don't know that there's a way around it. And I think that, and I part of me worries that a lot of this stuff had been happening for quite some time under the surface. And it's just become so obvious now that it's like, well, but once something becomes that obvious, it's kind of hard to do something about it. And so I worry about that a lot.
Thanks, Jack.
I wish I had better things, but no, I'm very concerned about them becoming, that becoming.
Well, I guess it's just everybody's going to have to work that much harder then. It's true.
Keep working.
Before we wrap this up, I wanted to remind everybody that in terms of, let's say you're looking at something and you're not entirely sure whether it's true or not. Okay, if it's a piece of disinformation, misinformation, is also part of that category. I invite people, if you're in Europe, to go over to stopfake.org, because they have, they put up in many languages what is happening in each, There's also the EU Disinfo site. You can go there as well. In the States, what kind of websites can people, look at?
So on my end, I'll offer DFR Lab, which is the Digital Forensics Lab, and they actually have schooling for it. They have courses that you can take to recognize disinformation. And then on top of it, they also, work to expose disinformation. So I think they're excellent.
And think of what you're feeling, right? Because what happens to me is that I see something and I get angry, and that's when I know I need to stop. And I don't click on it. Don't just, if it's there today, it'll be there tomorrow. Look how you feel. And because that's what they want, right? They want us to get angry.
And also a good thing to remember is that social media apps tend to design their user interface where the first 10 minutes of content you receive is meant to be pleasurable. And then everything after that is just meant to piss you off.
All right. In Italy, I think it's
that's
less.
how they keep you on longer.
It's from the get-go. You turn it on and you're like,
on my feed, it's
so anytime I'm pissed off on Twitter, I'm like,
exactly. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Olga, my love. Jack, my love. Okay, we didn't see your cat come along, but it'll have to be for another time. She's here.
Oh,
we get to see.
Good.
Hey, she's here for the egg. Ciao. All righty.
That's a disinfo.
She made a little appearance in there before. She was sneaking around.
Okay,
so
that's.
But no, she's
a disinfo ninja.
I like that. All right then.
Meow, meow. We're going to get you a little uniform.
Okay, everybody. So this is us saying goodbye from Kremlin File. Bye. Hey, everybody. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and please visit our website, kremlinfile.com. This is a Bunker Crew Media production hosted by Olga Lautman and me, Monique Camara. with executive producers Marley Clements, Jack Bryan, Grant DeSimone, Ben Brett, and Jordy Mycelis of Midas Media, with associate producers Ruby Frankel and Sarah Metz. Theme music by Oreste Camarra. Sound editing and mixing by Joy Ellett. Subscribe to Kremlin File wherever you listen to podcasts.